Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. A couple of days ago, you described Javelins and Stingers as defensive weapons and MiGs and planes as offensive weapons. So how do we classify the armed drones that we're sending?
I would remind everybody that Russia is invading Ukraine, not the other way around. Ukraine is not invading Russia. They are not going into a foreign country and invading that country. And what we're sending to Ukraine is security assistance, all of it, and weapons that they are effectively using to defend their country against Russian aggression. And that is how all of this material would be categorized.
In that sense, then, wouldn't MiGs also be defensive since Ukraine is defending itself from attacks from Russia?
Well, again, this is all assessments made by our Defense Department, but I would tell you that as it relates to the transfer of fighter planes from a U.S. base in Germany into contested Ukrainian airspace, where our military and intelligence community determined the benefits provided to Ukraine's defense are low and the risks of escalation are high, that is how we assess that, but also those type of planes would be a different category of military assistance.
It seems like we're splitting hairs over semantics in terms of how we're classifying some of these weapon systems. And obviously the president's gotten some criticism from both sides of the aisle for even when he takes action, sometimes doing it after there's been a lot of political pressure, for instance, on imposing the sanctions, on sending the Stingers and the Javelins, on banning Russian oil. So if there's any chance that the U.S. is going to facilitate the transfer of MiGs in some way, why not just do it now?
Well, I think we've outlined pretty clearly why we've made the decision not to do that, including the fact that they have multiple squadrons of planes that they can utilize, and the fact that, most importantly, the types of assistance that we've been providing, anti-armor, anti-tank, anti-missiles, is what is effective in fighting this war on the ground. That is why we've provided that assistance. None of the weapons we've sent to Ukraine could be used to launch an invasion of a country like Russia. That's a fact. That's why we call them defensive weapons. That's why the Defense Department calls them defensive weapons. And I would remind everybody that they are the country that are under attack.
I want to move on to the Iran talks. This week the president said that we are crippling Putin's economy with punishing sanctions that are only going to grow more painful over time. But the State Department said that the administration would not sanction Russian participation in nuclear projects that are part of the JCPOA. So how does the administration justify calling for such strong sanctions on Russia but giving them a pass when it comes to Iran? Isn't that hypocritical in some sense?
There's absolutely no pass given. They're not getting additional assistance or sanctions relief of any sort. They have an implementation role. They've had an implementation role in the past as it relates to the Iran nuclear deal, and that is certainly what we would be talking about in this regard. But for clarity purposes, there's absolutely no additional sanctions assistance that Russia would be receiving that is outside of the Iran nuclear deal.
So, but just carving out what's already there and giving it protection, that it will not be sanctioned?
Well, to explain to you, or for those of you who have covered back in 2015, you may remember this, that there have been roles in the past that Russia has played in terms of the movement or the protection, the nuclear protections in some capacity of as we're implementing the Iran deal, and that's what we're really referring to. That's part of the discussion in the deal.
This is a new deal that we're doing.
It's the similar implementation components. It's an implementation and discussion around a similar deal that was discussed back in 2015.
And then the Director of National Intelligence annual threat assessment last month said that Iran has threatened to kill former and current U.S. officials in retaliation for the U.S. killing the IRGC's leader, Qasem Soleimani. So do those threats constitute terrorism?
Well, I would just remind you all that where we are, one, I'm not going to just confirm or get into specifics about any threats through intelligence channels, but where we are right now, is that not only has Iran's nuclear program advanced, but their behavior in the region and beyond has gotten more aggressive, including by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. So the notion that the actions of the past administration pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal has cut down on the actions or the escalatory behavior of the Iran Revolutionary Guard is inaccurate. The Iranian government has actually doubled their budget or something like that. So So the notion that the approach that the status quo is effective and making us safer just doesn't bear out in any form of facts.
So they should not then, the IRGC be delisted from the terrorist blacklist?
There's an ongoing negotiation. I'm not going to get into specifics of it, but I would just note that the status quo where we stand has done nothing to make us safer in any regard. In fact, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard has only been strengthened. Go ahead.